What's up, guys? It's Gary with Fresh from the Farm Fungi. I'm here in Denver, Colorado. It's August 6, 2021, and today's video is going to be about hyperbreeding, in particular hyperbreeding Cordyceps militaris. So if you haven't checked out our videos on how to breed Cordyceps, you can check in our video playlists, or I'll put the link below. But basically the idea is that we are going to be germinating different ascospores to produce unique phenotypes. So in hyperbreeding, I'm going to use 4 different phenotypes of Cordyceps. So this is going to create a large genetic variation so that we can try to get stronger strains. Another feature of the hyperbreeding that I'm going to do is that I'm going to go directly from fruit, the fruit body ejecting the spores directly into a liquid culture. So this is going to bypass a lot of the technical and more precise breeding methods, but hopefully it saves time and will give us some really good results. My philosophy is that the strongest will survive and outgrow the competing phenotypes in the solution. So on top of that, I would like to give a shout out to Lenny Rockwell over at Mycelium Emporium. He just sent in some really nice liquid cultures that I'm going to be breeding, and I've got an Agaricus brunensis that I'm going to be cultivating in some max yield bins. So I'm really excited, and an aspen oyster. It's all about genetic diversity when you're breeding mushrooms. So I'm really excited about these, and let's go down to the Cordyceps area, and I'll select some fruiting bodies that I want to breed, and then we'll make the liquid culture as the spore inoculum, so direct fruiting body into a liquid culture. Alright guys, so I am here in my Cordyceps area. You can see I've got a bunch of different phenotypes. This is kind of the end of the life cycle for some of the phenotypes that I was growing at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. So they're starting to show some weird deformities, and I wanted to create a rigorous strain utilizing 4 different phenotypes. So you can see this first one is a wild UK Cordyceps. So it's got some really skinny, kind of weird, just long, thin fruiting bodies, and I'm gonna try to select some of the nicer looking ones. And then I've got, this is an Appalachian Gold Beast. So there's some really nice looking ones in here. I actually grew it out on bird seed, so I'm messing around with some different substrates. But yeah, that's the Appalachian Gold Beast. And then this is also from Appalachian Gold, I believe. It's a W1728. So this one is kind of chunkier. It's got some really nice canopy. And then I've also got this terrestrial fungi strain that I've been growing for about 18 months now, so it's still holding up nicely. You can see some really thicker, kind of elongated fruiting bodies. So 1 wild phenotype, and then 2 of the other top contenders, in my opinion, really thick. So I'm hoping to get thicker, taller fruiting bodies utilizing some of these guys. All right. Okay guys, so I'm here in my lab, and you can hear the flow hood going behind me. I'm just doing some grain spawn, but it's really important in this hyperbreeding process to keep everything sterile, because it's going to go right into a liquid culture. You want to do it in front of a flow hood. So I've got some TSB or trypticase soy broth, and then I'm going to be using these wide mouth jars that I normally use for grain spawn, but it has the perfect size lid where I can take a sterile petri dish and then attach it to the top here so it can release its spores into solution. So I'm just going to start off by making a solution of this tryptic soy broth, and then I'm going to be sterilizing it and then placing a bunch of them in front of the flow hood. Well, first they'll cool off, and then I'll place them all in front of the flow hood, and then as I harvest the Cordyceps, they will be sterile from growing in vitro, so then I can use sterile forceps to attach them to the lids, and then I'll be able to drop spores into solution. And then one more part, I'm going to use magnetic stir bars so I can stir the spore solution without contaminating the liquid. Okay guys, so it's pretty easy to make the TSB. It's just 25 grams in 1 liter of water. I chose to do filtered water this time, but you can use RO water or just tap water should work fine. And then you just mix it in until it's completely dissolved, just like Kool-Aid. And then we're gonna load it up in our jars with a stir bar. And then I'm gonna be using one of our mycology lids just so that as it's cooling in front of the flow hood, it will pass through this filter, so I know that the solution will be sterile. And then once it's cooled overnight, we'll put the lid of the sterile petri dish on top and then attach the mushroom with some petroleum jelly so it disperses the spores into solution. So I'll go ahead and mix this and let it cool overnight. Alright, so you can see it's been completely dissolved now. So we'll just pour this out into the jars. Alright, now we'll just screw on the lids fairly tightly with a little bit of wiggle room, and then we will place them in the pressure cooker to do our sterilization at 15 psi or 250 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. Guys, so I've got my TSB broth and it's cooled off for a couple days now. I actually let it sit for 3 days just to verify that there's no growth going on. And then I've got my sterile petri dishes. So we're gonna put some petroleum jelly on the lid of these, and then I have the different Cordyceps mushrooms that I'm going to attach to the lids, and then they are going to disperse the spores into solution, and then we'll incubate these liquid cultures for a few days, and then we'll move forward with the Cordyceps process. So I've got this really old, tired, wild strain from the UK that I'll start off with, and then I've got this strain from terrestrial fungi, Kaizen Cordyceps, and Appalachian Gold. So we've got 4 different phenotypes that are all going to be mixing together in solution, and I will start off by grabbing the petroleum real quick. Alright guys, so I have my petroleum jelly here. I'm just going to spray this off with some alcohol, and then I also have some sterile cotton swabs that I will be applying the petroleum onto the lid. And I'm working in front of a flow hood just to try to keep everything as sterile as possible. So these Cordyceps were grown in vitro. I grew them on wild bird food or wild bird seed, just something I had lying around, and I've been experimenting a lot with different like 1 or 2 part substrates to try and make our process more efficient. So I'll start off just by cracking these lids open. And these are just wide mouth lids, the mycology lids that my friend Zach over at Mushroom Cult, he manufactures these, but they're on our Etsy page, Fresh Fungi. Alright, so let's take a peek at some of these delis, and you can see we've got some really thick Cordyceps, and I'm going to try to do my best to not butcher this. I do have my sterile forceps here. Just trying to spin this cake out. So this is the W1728, and I'm actually going to make a spore print with this as well. So the first brooding body, I'm just going to do a spore print. That's the idea, is I'll just stick the fruiting bodies to the lids, and then this way you'll get a good visualization of the spores dropping onto the petri dish. All right, I'm gonna flip this camera around and kind of go through our entire procedure. Let's take a look. Here are sunflower seeds, if you're confused why it's such a dark substrate. These are a little bit more premature. From the bird seed compared to the rice is it's very messy. liquid, and I'll just call this one Monster Mix 1. So now we're just gonna wait, and then we have these as kind of a measure for how many spores are being released. So we'll come back in about 12 or 15 hours and see how they're progressing. Alright guys, so it's been 72 hours since I inoculated those plates. I'm just going to do some quick plate reading before I go ahead and make my bulk substrate for the Cordyceps. So I'm just looking for any blotchy growth or abnormalities, but after a quick glance, these look super good. I'll just go through them and then we'll move on to making our rice and broth. Alright guys, so these rice cakes just cooled overnight, so they're about room temperature now, and we came up with 20 total. So I've got 5 different liquid culture varieties, and I'm going to inoculate 4 rice containers for each liquid culture that I have, and then I've got these lids over here that I'll cap them off, and then we'll throw them into incubation. Guys, so I've got this first batch going into incubation. So you can see we're at 79 degrees, 54% humidity, and I'll let these colonize and then we'll throw them into fruiting. It's day 7 in incubation, and you can see we've got some beautiful colonization. So I'm gonna go ahead and move these into fruiting, and then we'll wait for some pins. So I'm in my Cordyceps corner here, and I'm still unsure about whether or not the blue light versus this LED light here makes a big difference. So I'm going to divide up all these different phenotypes into 2 test runs on the LED and then 2 under the blue spectrum, and it looks like we're right at 70, so that's a little bit warmer than I really like, but I've got my air conditioner right off to the side here, so hopefully, you know, as the temperatures cool outside, that'll drop into the 60s. I think 70 is still okay. If we have the right pairings, we should be able to get some fruits. So I'll go ahead and set these up, and I'll do an update as soon as we get some pins. Alright guys, so it's been about 6 weeks and our first pin sets started to form. So we've got our monster mix number 3. You can see some pins starting to form at the edges, and you can faintly see them on the opposite side. And then we've got the same thing going on with this monster mix number 4. Very faint on the interior. And a pretty big one right in here, kind of where that condensation is, on monster mix number 5. And then if we go over to the LED lighting, I still don't see any pins yet, so that could be the first indications that this blue spectrum lighting might have an increase on the pinning at least. So I'll keep you guys updated as these grow out, and then I'm going to want to re-clone these as soon as we get some viable fruits. Alright guys, it's almost been 7 weeks since we inoculated these, and we've got some really nice fruiting bodies forming on 2 of the containers. So the monster mix number 3, you can see we've got some really solid fruiting bodies coming in. And then also the monster mix number 5 over here. This one has that really big cluster, so I'm going to select these mushrooms to clone on agar, and that way I'll have some really solid strains for the winter cultivation. Okay, so something I want to note is that as we move farther and farther away from the LED, we get a lot better pin sets, so maybe the lighting had more to do with it than I thought. But we are starting to see some coloration here, and some small pins on these ones too, but I'm just gonna select for the fastest and the most rigorous grow. So this is the monster mix number 5, and some really big guys there. And then the monster mix number 3, we got some really nice fruiting bodies there. Alright guys, I'm very excited right now. We're here in the lab and we have a proof of concept for our hyperbreeding procedure. So one of the things that is different between the traditional and more precise breeding method is that when you have a multi-spore culture like this, you can create many different phenotypes in the same container. So I'm going to be opening these up and selecting for the biggest, most rigorous fruiting bodies, and then cloning them onto MEA and PDA agar petri dishes. So we had 2 containers that were successful. This one I'm really excited about. We got some nice big fruits, and yeah, so during the hyperbreeding procedure, we ended up saving a ton of petri dishes, a ton of time, so that equals a ton of money. And using this method, I'm going to try to select these big guys here and one of the most rigorous fruiting bodies here, so that we'll have a couple really nice strains that we can run over the winter. So I'll flip this around, and I'll put on my mask so I don't contaminate anything, and then we'll be cloning probably 2 or 3 different phenotypes from our hyperbreeding monster mix. I guess monster mix 3 and monster mix 5 is what I'll designate these. Alright guys, I'm super excited. Thanks for hanging in for this whole video. I know it's a long one, but I wanted to do it all in one. I would get a lot of requests on specific parts of breeding, and this is a new endeavor for me. So I'm going to be translating this into my other culinary gourmet mushrooms. And if you guys have any suggestions of what types or varieties that I should breed over the winter, comment below. Definitely give us a thumbs up if you enjoy this video. If you haven't subscribed yet and you're looking forward to more videos like these, hit that subscribe button. I'm going to flip this around, clone these out, and then I'll go ahead and post this up on YouTube. Guys, so I'm just going to start by spraying my hands off here, and let's dive into these plates. So let's go ahead and flip these over. Just double check these before we start. It's always good to just check your plates for any contamination that might have popped up during storage. But so far so good. Alright, so I'll just split these. So we have some PDA or potato dextrose and MEA, and then we've got our monster mix number 5 and monster mix number 3. So these were the 2 successful containers, and inside there may be multiple phenotypes. So the moment of truth here, I'm going to crack this first container open, and hopefully we can clone that guy here. Alright. So it's a little bit sticky because of the rice, but I'm going to do my best to kind of carefully Alright, so I'm going to select for this large cluster here, and I'll do that by carefully picking these. And also there's a pretty big fat one here that I'm going to go for. But basically, got a piece of sterile tissue. Wait till that Alright, then I'm going to set these off to the side here. And go ahead and we can crack open this guy. And I'm going to open up a fresh blade and a Alright guys, so that's the conclusion of our hyper breeding video. I'm going to let these different phenotypes grow out. So Monster Mix 3 and then Monster Mix 5. And it looks like I might have chosen a couple different phenotypes, but we'll see how they grow out on the auger. Please share this video. I know that it was a big concern for some people for how much petri dish was consumed during our original breeding project. So this method really reduces the amount of petri dishes, the amount of auger, the amount of time. I know that you have to have a flow hood and be really sterile in these procedures, but I think it's worth sharing with the mushroom community. Please give us a thumbs up if you enjoy our videos. Subscribe if you're looking forward to more of the videos like these. Check out our Etsy Fresh Fungi. I'll be posting these cultures over the winter once I start my big Cordyceps project. Usually I do that in the off season just because I don't have enough time with my gourmet mushrooms. But I'm super excited. This is our proof of concept, first time ever doing the hyper breeding procedure, and we are going to apply this to our other gourmet mushrooms over the winter as well. Alright guys, I appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, much love.